Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of On Air. Great to have you here and great to have our guest here, Anup Khera. Anup is the VP and GM International for Attentive. Is that right?
That is indeed.
That's a good start. We got it right to start with. Anup, first and foremost, great to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us. How are you?
I'm really good, Owen. Thank you so much for kind of having me on. Yeah, it's been a good week. It's the end of the week. It's sunny in London, so I can't complain.
Brilliant, brilliant. Yeah, the sun makes us all shine, I'm sure. Look, thanks for being here. We're going to be talking today about a topic that's really interesting, actually, because we're talking about how you build a business, how you build a go-to-market strategy and a sales org internationally when you enter into a new organization, whether that be an organization doing it for the first time internationally, coming over from the US into the UK or EMEA, or whether that be you're taking over an existing and you've got to make it work better. We're going to try and pluck out some learnings from your current experience and your last couple of experiences where you've been doing that, and see if we can help our audience understand the mistakes you made along the way and the things that you got right and you definitely do again. So really interesting topic. What we like to do though, before we get into topic on this, is just give our guest 2 minutes, because some people will know you, others won't. 2 minutes. Who's new? Who are attentive?
Cool, great. So I want to flip it the other way around. So Attentive, we are an SMS marketing platform. So basically helping brands to build one-to-one relationships with their customers using SMS as the main channel. So ultimately driving lifetime value and loyalty. Anup Khera. So my role at Attentive is VP and GM International. So whilst we built a great business in the US, my role is to take that great product and its offering to international markets, including EMEA and APAC. So all good fun at the moment, and building that business currently.
Nice. So just for a bit of context, what stage are you at in that journey?
So just to go back a sec, so Attentive has been around for about 6 years now, Owen, of which we've had a tremendous ride over 6 years, like going from zero to 1,500 employees, over 6,000 customers. But that happened, like the explosion happened in the last 3 years. So I think they realized there's a good product market fit. And I joined at the beginning of February. So we're talking like 4 or 5 months now
Mm.
as employee number one outside of North America, with the sole
Mm.
purpose to kind of build a business here in the UK that will kind of then service EMEA.
Yeah.
And literally, I've just opened up hiring this week for Australia for the APAC region as well. So still very early days, but exciting times ahead.
Nice. Do you know, and I'm going to touch on this challenge in a minute, because you may or may not know that I'm an Australian citizen, spent 8 years in Australia, and then obviously a British citizen as well. So with a business partner over in Sydney, I understand the challenges of trying to collaborate, work together across those time zones and that sort of distance. So we'll dig into that, because I know that'll be one of your future challenges, I'm sure. So great to hear that you're right at the beginning of that journey. You're probably in the midst of building and working it all out and making mistakes and learning from them, and doing things that you're kind of hoping will work, and there's logic and thought behind it. So let's get into some of the stuff. There's a bit of theory behind the way that you do this, and there's a bit of thought behind, what are the things that you do first? Where do you start when you know you've got that as an objective and that's your task at hand?
Yeah, really good question. And I think just to be clear, some of these learnings well, actually, these learnings have all definitely come from mistakes I've made across my career. I wouldn't say I got it right at all. The first shot, it took a number of iterations. But I think one of the first things that I generally have done, whether it's this role or previous roles, where I suppose there's two slight variations. In one is like you inherit a team already, or are you kind of responsible for building a team out from the offset? Now, I just tend to like when I kind of first come into a business is spend time with the team at all levels, and I think one of the first things there to do is literally sit down with members of the GTM team, ask questions, understand. One of the first questions I actually ask is like, what is it we do as a product? And it's very very interesting actually, response you have. And I had an example in one of my last roles where I asked that question to about 30 different people, and I probably got about 30 different responses, which kind of makes you
Yeah.
think, hold on, there is a challenge, because internally, if we're not aligned on what we do, then it's going to be really, really difficult for like prospects to kind of have that external facing message. So it's like understanding, yeah, that that internal message and getting that alignment is really, really important. But also, I think it does a couple of things for you. I think just by spending time with people, you get to really understand what's working well for people and also what their blockers are as well, what's stopping them be successful. So kind of doing that, and also an element of credibility. You kind of come in and you can just speak to people in different functions. You kind of get to know people as well, which comes in very, very useful later on as well. So yeah, one of the first things is definitely around getting that alignment, speaking to people, and that helps me to say, okay, what should the message be? Once that message is defined, then it's like, okay, what are our goals for the region, right? And then can we articulate those goals really, really clearly? So everyone is aligned on our external facing message. Everyone's aligned on our internal goals and what we want to achieve. And in effect, everyone knows what success looks like. But I think one of the things that you have to keep doing is just over communicating that. Like almost every time you speak to people, not every conversation, but like it's got to be a regular cadence, right? Because it sounds really simple, but like if you don't keep reiterating that message, you can lose sight of it, especially when you're early days and you're spinning a number of plates. So yeah, I'll say alignment, and then just kind of have clear, concise goals that are articulated.
How much, I guess, translation do you have to do? Because as the first in a region, you're looking at the people you're having those 30 conversations with who gave you 30 different answers. I'm guessing are based in the US, or they're based on another continent where the market is different, the experience is different. You know, they've got a foothold, they've got a brand, whatever it might be. You're starting afresh. Do you have to take that message and go, okay, these are the bits that I think can work, but actually I need to adapt it and change it? Or can you just copy and paste, so to speak, and run with it?
Yeah, so kind of, I think there's two ways there. I think if you inherit a team and you've already got an international team already, then it's fine. You just kind of define, and as I previously said, if you are employee number one, I think at that point you have to understand what they're saying, but you definitely need to adapt it for a region. I think you have a bit of an advantage in a way if you are one of the first ones in and you're hiring from scratch, because
Yeah.
you get to define very quickly, okay, this is who we are and this is how we're going to kind of, this is the message we're putting into region X versus region Y. And because you're not almost having to unwire something that people have been saying already, I find it a lot easier to do that from scratch. But yeah, 100%. I think what works, let's say in the US, I'm not saying you have to completely rip that up,
No.
but I think you definitely need to refine that for local regions.
Yeah, really interesting. I'm really intrigued by that notion of those 30 conversations and how different they are. And I wonder how many of our audience have gone through that process. And it leads me to ask around the sense of how critical that step is, because I would have thought a lot of people will go into a new org like that and they might skip that bit. They might not spend that time because it could easily feel like you're not having an impact early in a new role. You're getting paid a lot of money to go, grow a region. It's one of those sort of foundation things that makes a lot of sense, but actually, it doesn't allow you to bring a lot to the table, does it? And I'm guessing you, looking back, having done that a few times, can really see the value in that part of the process.
Yeah, and I think, look, I made that mistake before. You kind of get a role and you're like, great, like it's new, it's shiny, you're infused, and you're like, right, let's just go, right? We've got a number to hit and get there.
Yeah,
And it's almost like you have to stop and kind of almost create that plan, because otherwise what you tend to do is become a bit of a bumpy journey on the way, whereas taking that time and it doesn't have to take like weeks upon weeks. You can kind of do that over the first 10 days, a few calls a day, and you kind of get a good sanity check on what's happening. But I think it's really important, and likewise I think what it also shows, especially if you're coming in as a senior leader, just taking time to speak to ICs makes them feel valued as well, right? Like they're being heard, being listened to. You're asking what I know. One of the questions I always ask is, if I had a magic wand today and I could improve something for you in the business for you to become more successful, what would that be? Also enables me on areas that maybe in my function or outside of my function that I can help refine and tweak.
yeah. And what a great way to get stakeholders on board supporting you in the early stage, because if you can go and tick a couple of those off reasonably quickly, or show that you've taken it seriously, listened to it, you've done something about it, people are your fan very quickly, and then they're ready to help you, right? I'm guessing that's a good little tactic. So you're in, you've had those conversations, you've worked out that nobody says anything consistently internally, nobody's aligned, but you've got to do that in your region. What do you do next?
I think then it's like it's hiring, right? Because I think you've got that. You always come into a role, and whether it like in this one where it's employee number one, or like where you have to add incremental headcount. I think it's about getting the right hires in.
Mm.
Now, I suppose hiring is a topic we could talk about for quite a long time, but I think just the takeaways there is that I think you need to get the right hires in, and not almost feel that pressure that you just have to get someone in just for the sake of it. And right now, the market's bonkers, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how long that will last for. We'll wait and see.
Mm.
But I think you need to hire the people that can enable you to scale. And I've learned that because I can't do everything, right? And if you're a leader in a business, you can't. And I think there's that you have to empower your team, and you have to almost have the components in the people that you're hiring, the skill sets that kind of complement your gaps. So it's about, okay, getting the right people in there, hiring for your gaps. And then what I like to almost do is implement a leadership team as soon as possible. Now, when I say a leadership team, it doesn't have to necessarily be like, oh, they are actual leaders in the business. But even if it was, I don't know, someone that would be a representative from the enterprise function, or someone from solution engineering, just so I've kind of got someone from each kind of function, even within GTM,
Yeah.
that can like really come together and can own a part of their business, and then can make that part really successful. I think is really, really important. And I suppose the
Yeah.
last one is, and we had a really good conversation. I was with a number of leaders and VCs yesterday. I think I spoke to you about this before,
Mm.
and we're talking about hires and what hires outside of GTM are really critical. And I think the big one that a lot of people will always or sometimes overlook is having a marketing hire
Yeah.
in region. And really, my goal is to kind of have within the first 12 months, you should have someone from marketing on the ground in the region that you're kind of um, you're in, or your teams are in, to help support in that region.
Is a really good point. And I think you're right. It's like, oh, we can rely on marketing over in the US. They'll do the job. Very, very different mindset when it comes to marketing over there. And I think it's a really, really good way of looking at things. I'm keen to just touch on what could be the elephant in the room for a few people around recruitment. So you touch on really quickly. It's a bonkers market. Don't know how long it will last. Agreed, agreed. I guess my question to you is, what are you finding is working for you now? I've been keen to understand. You're obviously hiring. Are you finding certain ways to break through and find good people? Are you finding good strategies to get there? Or I know it's a challenge, but are there some success stories there for you?
Yeah, there are. One, I think I'm really lucky in the fact that we've got a great internal talent team there. I think we are quite strict on the criteria
Yeah,
of people that we want in the business, from a couple of different aspects. One around the person's capabilities to do the role, and I'd probably break that down into two parts. One would be around like, okay, characteristic traits, like are they resilient, are they gritty, all of that good stuff there. And then around execution experience. So I don't know, have they done a similar role? Have they done it in the industry? So you kind of got that component. And then I think the other side of it is around culture,
mm,
because I think that's a huge part. You can go and get a rock star on paper, but if they don't fit the team dynamic, then all of a sudden that team doesn't grow, or the business doesn't grow in the way
yeah,
that you want. So I think we look at those elements. We kind of score against those. We also have a number of people across the business meet candidates. So I think at that point you're getting a number of opinions on there, and again at some point we're testing for the skill sets that we want through some
mm,
sort of task in our process, which really helps. I think a lot of people will always say the right things, and I think a lot of people are tuned into like, okay, this is what I should be saying, and these are the things that people want
mm,
to kind of hear, and you kind of get people to almost um, was it walk the walk and not just talk the talk, and I think
yeah.
that's really helped us get good talent as well.
It's interesting. My next question was going to be about culture, and you touched on it, so I'm going to keep going with that one. When you set out to build a team, how much are you looking to reflect the culture that already exists in another continent in the org already? How much are you looking to consciously define your culture before you build it? And how much are you allowing the culture to be defined by the people you bring in and to be sort of organically evolving?
Yeah, that's a great question, and a really important one as well. So maybe I'll give you some context of like one of the things that's worked quite well, like the term kind of like having a landing team. So this touch on hiring, but it does then result in culture. So right now, I think one of the things where I made a mistake before in a previous role was that we hired literally. I got into a region in a role and it was like, okay, we had no team, and I had to hire everyone from scratch.
Yeah.
So when you looked at okay, how long it took them to understand the sales motion, the process, the culture of the company, a long time. And the clock is always ticking when you own a number. Whereas if you get a landing team, and the landing team is where ultimately what you're doing is you're bringing in or bringing across like people from the US to come and
Yeah.
work in the UK, that know the sales process, know the sales motion, have relationships in the business, have been in the company long enough to understand the culture that's
Mm.
there at HQ or in other regions, and kind of bring them here. And then with that, what we're doing is complementing that with people in regions, so people in the UK that know market, that
Yeah.
know have contacts within brands and relationships. And I think that whilst we don't want to completely replicate, right? Because I think it is different countries, different regions, different cultural nuances. I want to kind of enable us to build our own culture, but have a good steer and a guide from what good culture looks like in our business from
Mm.
HQ.
Yeah, makes sense. And it's critical. You said earlier, it's an important question. It is because so many leaders won't define culture and will let it be defined by the people they bring in. And it's like anything, if you've got your values and you're recruiting around those values, you find people who are more likely to elevate you. If it's pot luck otherwise. And I think, maybe it's something that we tend to be conscious about after the fact rather than before the fact a bit too much. And I'm keen to just extend that into international. So, you're going to go and build a team in APAC. It's a long way away. What's your plan for maintaining that culture, for making sure that you keep the collaboration piece, that you connect people in, despite the fact that they're 23,000 kilometers away or whatever it is?
Yeah, so I'm still working on that at the moment.
The answer is don't
Not
know
yeah,
yet.
not defined yet. But I think look, I looked at it this way when I joined this business and I was on my own. I truly didn't feel alone, if I'm honest. And yeah, I'm literally on an island here, and that's not even a metaphor, right? Like the US was there, and I remember day one, Owen, and super pumped to start a new role. Open up the laptop at like in the morning to the sound of crickets while the whole company was asleep back at HQ before like it was about 1 o'clock and everyone started coming online. So, but I think well, whilst culture is something that leaders and a company can instill, I think it's also down to everyone in the business to be part of that and make culture happen. So whether it's like how do I make the Australia team feel part of the culture, I think it'll be me, but also be individual contributors that will be reaching out. Other departments, like they reached out to me when I joined. I think you kind of have that good collaboration and culture ingrained in the business, which I'm very fortunate to say that we do have here. But yeah, then it's about spending time as well. I think you can't be disconnected. So yeah, it might mean a few trips over to Australia. Just what likewise, hopefully getting the team to kind of come over to UK, US as well, just to spend time. I think it's really, really important.
Sounds awful, trip to Australia, doesn't it? Absolutely terrible.
Hard life.
So what are the other things that you've got to think about? So getting in and talking to people, spending the time with people, understand that, defining the culture, getting those first hires right. I love that concept of the landing team, putting them across. I guess it gives you a bit of a temporary breather while you work it out and a better chance of really connecting with the business and understanding it. Are there other things that you think people just don't think about that you've done and worked for you, and that you'd do again if you had to do it again?
Yeah, one of the things that I tend to always do where possible is like get in front of customers and prospects as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Right, be part of a deal. I think my last company, I sold a couple of the first enterprise deals we did. Um, and it's when I talk about that, sometimes I've been in conversation with other leaders, and some people are like, oh, I haven't done it for a while. Some people are like, I still do it.
Mm.
So I think it varies, but for me, it works, and it works for me for a couple of reasons. A, if I'm in front or I'm in front of a prospect or a customer, even kind of supporting on a deal or actually running a deal, it helps me really understand firsthand what's working and what's not,
Mm.
what the objections are in a deal. Because I think we can, as leaders, sometimes sit behind Salesforce dashboards and you sit behind kind of training and you kind of think, well, it's not real life, right? It's never the same as a textbook versus like being in the field. And I think that gives you first-hand experience. And that first-hand experience works to help you in a couple of ways. One, I think it builds instant credibility with your team because I think you are, I mean, you're not afraid to do what you're asking them to do,
Yeah.
right? Secondly, it enables me to be able to then give feedback to the business, right? Because especially if you're in a new region, there will be nuances in the product or the market that you need to be able to go back to the business and say, like, whilst this is working really well, we need to make some potential changes here in order for accelerate growth. So I think there's a couple of benefits that really come off that, and get in front of prospects and clients, and just from a customer standpoint as well, just understand why they purchased this. Like, what was it about? What we're driving for their business? We can, so you can talk about it. And at some point, you're going to need references in a new region, and it's building those relationships to help you get new customers on board as well.
And how can you coach somebody through something, whether that's deal cycles, whatever it might be, or a period of underperformance when you know they're capable and you're trying to get them? How can you coach them and help them if you don't understand the process? And it is not the same from one organisation, one sales process to another, is it?
Yeah, 100%. And that's sometimes a challenge. Like, okay, you could have sold, and it's probably been a while, but it's probably a question I'd be interested in. Maybe run a survey on that last time sales leaders actually closed the deal or
Close the deal.
Well, not even won a deal, right? You could have lost it, but you were still in the motion, right?
Yeah, I think the wrong sales leaders would say they close most of the ones they sit on the 10-minute call with towards the back end of the deal when somebody's worked for hours and out months and months. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting concept. I think the health that comes from, and the understanding hygiene that comes from being in deals, being in meetings. You don't need to lead them, like you say, just even being there, being present, watching prospects, seeing prospects, both in terms of the market, which you're always getting secondhand information about, but also just in terms of your salespeople. Where are they? What are they doing different to what they did? There's that natural drift. They've started selling in a different way. How has that happened? But they do. We're human. It's a really helpful thing to do, not just at the beginning of a journey, but I think on an ongoing basis, surely.
Yeah, agreed. Try and get in front of that. To be honest, that's the part I enjoy anyway. Like, give me a customer call or a prospect call over a forecasting meeting any day, or looking at dashboards in Salesforce.
You're talking yourself down for a demotion here, mate. You'll be down in an AE role in no time, I'll tell you. Absolutely love it. So what are you excited about? What's coming up ahead? Obviously, you've got the APAC movement, busy hiring, bringing some important people in. What's happening in the next 3 months that you know is going to be A, a challenge, and B, exciting for you on this journey?
I think it's just then about having those fundamentals in place, and then it's like, okay, then it's the additional function. So like you need to kind of get on board in the business. For me, I look at it this way: it's that it's starting to scale. Then, right? Like, we started to understand. We've got people in. We understand our ideal customer profile. We understand the use case, and that's probably something else that we might touch on as well. It's just around the use cases and stuff. And one of the things that I've learned is to kind of keep it simple. Because there is that temptation, Owen, of kind of saying, right, we've got, I don't know, 3 products in our bag, and we've got 18 use cases that we could kind of go after. And in time, you can go and do that. But I think initially, if you want to just kind of build momentum and success, it's like do something really, really well. I kind of look at that, the sniper versus the kind of machine gun approach, and like just practice something, get your reps to practice something until they've got that down. And that's what we're doing right now. We're just focusing on certain use cases, certain offering, and just going to nail that within a certain vertical. So I'm excited to do that, and then also bringing in other functions into the organization as well. So we're kind of having like CS that have joined in. We've got solution engineering hiring, helping to get marketing in there. So all these kind of back office functions hopefully starting to really, really build the team out.
It's interesting to hear you talk earlier about that compromise between speed of hire and, I'll call it, accuracy of hire. Because you want to get the right people in, but time's ticking when you've got a number to hit all the time. I really like that phrase as well, however you put it. And it's really tempting to take somebody who's in front of you who can start tomorrow versus wait and wait and wait. How do you avoid that temptation?
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because like anyone who's got a number will know that that ticks every day, and the longer someone's not in, the bigger that gap becomes. However, but hiring the wrong person, like anyone that's been in a Series A especially will know, and my last one was a Series A, is the biggest mistake you can make when cash is limited is getting the wrong hires in place.
Yeah.
Right. So it's the biggest cash burn. So it's all about making sure it's done well. I think there is a time between, like, okay, you can't wait forever to be looking for, like, they need to tick every box. I think there's you have to prioritize, right? I think it's about making a priority matrix. What are the
Yeah.
components that are really, really key and critical in your particular business? And it will vary for different people in different organizations. And the other ones that you're prepared to probably say, well, I can probably spend some time coaching around this or enabling
Mm.
around this or upskilling. So yeah, I don't think there's an exact like what that time period look like, but I think yeah, it gets to a point where you're never going to get the perfect candidate, shall we say? It's always a compromise at some point.
And I'm guessing you would agree, based on the things I've heard you talk about in the past, that it's, that compromise might be more on skill and experience, but the compromise should never be on that culture piece, on that fit, that personality type, because you can work with somebody with the right attitude, train them in the skills, versus bringing somebody who's in the skills but just breaks the culture in the business.
Yeah, that's exactly it, right? I think there's certain things, like you said before, certain things can be coached. Actually, it's one of the things I ask kind of everyone that's I've ever hired is just two things. One, trust you have it implicitly to the moment you lose it. And second is hunger. Because you can't coach hunger. Like you either want to be hungry to be successful, want to do the right things, the right actions, be willing, be the right cultural fit, all of the other stuff, the business, we can give you that.
Yeah, really, I love that word hunger. I think it's a really, I don't hear that very often anymore. I don't know. There's something about that word when you said it, I hadn't heard it for a while. I'm thinking, oh, there's a really good way of looking at it. You hear coachability and all these sorts of things when people are looking for somebody. But I think if somebody's got hunger, it kind of encapsulates a lot of the good traits. Because if somebody's got hunger, they're likely to be open to being coached and wanting to learn and wanting to go. It's a really nice way of looking at it.
Yeah, I think the earlier you are in the build or in an early stage organization, the more important
Yeah.
that is. I think you can get to a point where, like, if you've got a team of a certain size, I'll give you a different example actually. So I know sometimes people are like, well, that person's out of industry, it might take some time to get them up to speed. And
Mm.
that's okay if you've got a team that's already kind of performing or been around for a while, you can afford to take um, on board people that may not have industry experience or may not have done enterprises or deal values as high, and you can kind of coach
Mm.
them around that. If you're early stage, you really need to have people that are going to be super motivated because you can't be there on every deal and you don't want to be there on every deal because you trust
Mm.
people, but you just want to make sure you just know if they're hungry, they're going to do what it takes. They're going to be out of bed every morning. They're going to be making the dials, sending the emails, like doing the research and just making it happen.
Love that, love that. You do want to be in every deal, you just can't.
Yeah.
I know you want to be there. um, I guess last question for me. I'm really keen. Just any mistakes that you can really, that stand out over the last couple of times you've done this and you've built orgs and you've had to factor all this stuff in. What is the mistake, or what are the mistakes that stand out to you and say, I'm not doing that again? I tried that, it didn't work. Is there anything that you can pull out for us?
The one I'd say, be it a mistake or thing that everyone should kind of consider in that role if you want to kind of build that successful business is most of the time you'll kind of be reporting into like a GTM role.
Yeah.
However, you need to think like a CEO,
Mm.
right? And regardless of whether you just kind of own the sales number, you really need to be thinking wider than that and the implications on your business, on the impact on product, on marketing. And even if you don't own those functions, you need to build those relationships in your region and at HQ because that's what's going to make your business successful. Because, like, yes, you can have a great sales team, but if the product's not right for the region, you're never going to be able to sell it. If you haven't got the brand awareness or marketing, it's never going to go and work. So you need to. There's a couple of examples there, but you need to think like a CEO and think bigger than just like GTM focused. You need to really
Yeah.
bring all of those components together. Because in effect, especially as a GM role, you are a CEO in a startup within a scale up.
Yeah, yeah. Do you know, that's a fantastic point. There's a lot of sales leaders out there people who own the revenue line, who are only focused on top. They break everything on the way to scale so fast, so quickly, and they haven't got that capability to see things holistically and see the impact to have other departments, P&L, all that sort of stuff. Very, very interesting point. Any other wise words? Anything we've missed? Any questions I haven't asked you? Any other learnings from this journey that you've been on?
No, if I had to give one last one and one for the road, then I would probably say, Owen, like, don't be afraid to be the expert you were hired for. Like, you were hired in that region, Europe, because you know Europe, you sold in Europe, you built teams in Europe, you are the expert. So if you have to communicate back to whether it's your CEO or to HQ, it's okay to kind of let them know why you were hired, and
Yeah.
that's what they paid you for, right? So
Mm.
I'm not saying you do it in a bad way, but just give that advice back, and be prepared to kind of set expectations that it's a process. Like, even though that business is scaling, like, you have to think about it this way. It took them time when they first started selling that product, and sometimes people get this term I love called success amnesia that I've
Yeah.
heard being used a few times. It's great. It's because they forgot what it took in order to get there. I think it's down to us to say, look, we're going back to basics, so it's going to take us a little grind to get there, but we're going to get there, and this is what I need in my region to make it work.
And it feels like really good advice, by the way. And it feels like you need to do that from day one as well, don't you? Because I'm guessing they'll come along with a plan in Europe, and it will have that success amnesia in it. Say, oh, we're going to get to X million in 12 months, and you've got to go, look, we need to work together. We need to be ambitious, but we also need to be realistic, and we've got to set the right expectations. And I think it's almost too late if you're doing that month two, month three. You've got to have those early conversations.
Yeah, 100%. And I think at that point, if it is that number, like, you just, like, sometimes you accept and commit, but as long as you've got the support and the kind of the people on the ground to make that happen, and a
Yeah,
commitment from the business, I think that's the important thing. You can get to any number if the business is behind you, and
yeah.
you keep that executive buy-in.
Yeah, love it. Anup, you are a wise man indeed. I've really enjoyed chatting about this. And some really fantastic points in there. I love those last couple of pieces of advice as well. I think, you know, the advice around thinking like a CEO for anybody in any role is a really valuable piece and can be a differentiator for you in terms of career progression. If you're capable to think about not just your lane and what it does for other people in the business and the business in a wider sense, I think it's a really valuable skill that not enough people show in business. So it's a really valuable piece of advice. I just want to say thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for talking to us and sharing your expertise. But before I give you the chance to go, um, Attentive, who should be talking to you? Who can you help? And how can they get in touch?
Yeah, so for Attentive, people that should be talking to us, marketers that are looking to kind of build one-to-one relationships with their consumers, looking to drive incremental revenue, specifically around retailers and e-com businesses. We kind of cater from SMB all the way up to large enterprise. How can they get hold of us? They can go to www.attentivemobile.com, contact us there, or likewise, you can contact me directly on my LinkedIn, Anup Khera.
Because he still loves selling, so give him a chance.
Yeah.
I think you're a good man. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it, and thank you for sharing your experience and expertise today as well.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. Owen.
Cheers.
Cheers.